Hello, I'm Michael Connolly and I'm the Kerry County archaeologist. And today we're standing in a field in a townland called Killaclohane, about 2 kilometres east of Milltown. And behind me is Killaclohane Portal Tomb. These tombs were built in the early Neolithic, around 3700, 3800 BC, and basically are the earliest known burial monuments in Ireland. They're built mainly of 3 structural stones in this case, some other examples of a 4th stone at the back. This tomb here in Killaclohane is constructed of a very large capstone weighing 13.5 tons and 2 tall portal stones at the front which faces to the north. Now, as I say, this tomb was very badly leaning to one side and was excavated in 2015 to facilitate the re-erection of the 2 portal stones and the replacement of the capstone. If you come around to the side here, you can see the thickness of the capstone, and you see in here under the capstone is the burial chamber. 2 portal stones here at the front support the weighted capstone, and 1 stone here is slightly smaller than the other stone on this side, and this is to accommodate the different thickness of the capstone on one side as compared to the other. This is the entrance between the 2 portal stones, and this is how the chamber would have been accessed when in use. So the capstone was removed by a crane in 2015, which allowed us to re-erect the portal stones back into their correct position, but at the same time allowed us the opportunity to excavate the chamber of the tomb itself. As I say, the tomb is orientated to the north and faces the entrance to Scotia's Glen, which leads into the Vale of Tralee on the other side of the Slieve Mish. So the interior of the chamber was excavated by a team of about 6 or 7 people in 2015, and we found evidence of cremation burial in the tomb, as well as artefacts dating to the early and middle Neolithic. The earliest material found in the tomb was carinated bowl pottery, which is the earliest type of pottery ever used in Ireland, and dates to around the time the tomb was constructed, around 3800 BC. We also found a range of very fine flint artefacts, including a knife, 3 arrowheads, a hollow scraper, all very finely made on very fine grained flint, and these were deposited probably with a second phase of burial in the Neolithic around 3500-3600 BC. We also found globular bowl pottery, which dates to the end of the Middle Neolithic around 3400 BC, which indicates a 3rd phase of burial. But I suppose most importantly in relation to this tomb, we discovered that it was used again in the Bronze Age, and at least 2 and probably more cremation burials were put into the tomb in the early Bronze Age. We're talking now around 2400 BC. The cremated bone we found, only 2 samples could be dated, and both the dated samples return dates in the early Bronze Age, so we cannot be certain if any of the cremated bone dates to the earlier Neolithic burials. Unfortunately, the soils in this area are extremely acidic, so any unburnt bone that would have been placed in the tomb would not have survived. The environment is just too acidic for the bone not to be eroded and decayed away completely. These 2 burials, if not more, were inserted into the tomb in the early Bronze Age. We got about 26 radiocarbon dates from the tomb from charcoal, as well as the 2 dates from bone. And the dates from charcoal indicate a long period of use into the early Bronze Age, but also indicate visitation and disturbance of the tomb through the late Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the early medieval period, into the high medieval period, and right up to 1950. So the tomb has a long history of reuse for burial, and then subsequently as a focal point or an important site in the landscape that was visited, was possibly offerings placed in the tomb, non-burial offerings. So it was an important site in the social history of the area. Now, why is the tomb at Killaclohane important? The tomb at Killaclohane is one of actually 3 tombs in this area. There's a second tomb in the townland about 1 kilometre to the east in Killaclohane Wood, which was excavated in 2017 and 2018, and there's a 3rd tomb about 1 kilometre slightly to the northeast in the townland of Brackhill, which is unexcavated. Now these three tombs comprise a little cluster of portal tombs, and this type of monument is very unusual in the southern half of Ireland. They're predominantly found in the northern half, and this is the only cluster of portal tombs known of in Munster. These monuments, as I've said already at the start, are burial monuments, but they are the earliest burial monuments that we know of to date in Ireland. And they are the monuments built by the first farmers, if you want to use that term, the earliest agriculturalists that arrived in Ireland, whether that be an influx of people from abroad or whether it be earlier Mesolithic populations that have taken on agriculture. But in many ways they're a monument to the death, if you like, of the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and the beginnings of agriculture. And this is important when we come to look at the analysis that was done on the finds, because one of the finds in particular, a flint knife, has evidence of being used for reaping cereals possibly, and definitely for the processing of plant matter. And we also found a portion of a saddle quern which would have been used to grind the harvested grain into flour. So not alone have we a burial monument that was built at the very, very beginnings of the Neolithic, at the very beginnings of agriculture, but we also have two artifacts that would have been involved in the processing of food and may actually have been seen as almost magical. You know, they were implements that were used in the production of food from the soil in a new way of life, and may have had magical religious properties, and that may be why they've ended up in the tomb. As I say, it's a part of a cluster of tombs, and there is evidence from the second one that was excavated in Killaclohane Wood that both of them have long histories of reuse and were important sites long, long after they stopped being used for burial in the Neolithic and in the Bronze Age. Indeed, the tomb at Killaclohane too had artefacts deposited in the late Bronze Age around 800 BC, and also possibly a food offering in the Iron Age. Now the next question you're probably going to ask is, why were the tombs built where they were? What did the landscape look like when the tomb was built? Now, to get back to the first question, the site for the tomb was chosen not because they wanted to build a tomb here, but because the raw materials were here. In the sense that the giant capstone you see behind me, and the same at the tomb in Killaclohane Wood, they're what are known as glacial erratics. These 13.5-ton stones were carried down from the Sleeve Mish to the north during the Ice Age and deposited here by glaciers. So the builders of the tomb came across these glacial erratics, or went looking for them, and they dug the glacial erratic out of the surrounding boulder clay. The pit from which it was dug out became the chamber, and when they'd raised one height of it to a sufficient height, they wedged the two portal stones at the entrance in under the higher end, or the lifted end of the tomb, creating your portal tomb. So it wasn't that the site was chosen, but the presence of the glacial erratic chose the site for the tomb. The two portal stones are also green sandstone, possibly deposited by glaciers as well, but because of their size they were more easily transportable. The nearest source of these stones is on the Sleeve Mish, which would have entailed crossing the River Main or Castlemaine Harbour to bring them to here, a task that probably wasn't easily doable. So these stones were here. The builders chose the site based on the presence of the glacial erratics. It's also important to remember that at the time these tombs were built, it wasn't an open and farm landscape like you see today. It would have been very heavily wooded. The tomb in Killaclohane Wood, as the name suggests, is built inside in the middle of a mixed forest, and the view there, where you can see very little around you because of the tree cover, is probably the situation that was here in Killaclohane 1 as well. So there wouldn't have been the open farmland you see today. The tomb was probably built in a clearing, cleared with stone axes to create a small open space to allow for the excavation of the glacial erratic out of the clay, its raising on one side, and the creation of the portal tomb that you see here today. So these monuments started out as burial monuments. They are built by the earliest farmers, if you like, to arrive in this part of Kerry. They built 3 of them, and as I say, they mark a change in the way of life. They mark, a seismic change in the way of life from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a settled agricultural lifestyle. And by the very nature of agriculture, it means that they were no longer named nomadic, and they settled in one place. Now, where is the settlement of the people that built the tombs at Killaclohane? It's impossible to say. As yet, we haven't found any evidence for it, even though we have carried out surveys in the area. The likelihood is it's probably closer to the River Main, which is about 2 kilometres to the north, because the requirements for a settlement to be much the same as the reasons why you would have one in any place today. You need access to water, you want to be on reasonably well-drained soils, and you want some protection from the prevailing winds which come from the south-southwest. So the likelihood is that it's possibly to the north of us, in the lee of a hill, closer to the river, where the necessary things for life, water, well-drained soils and shelter would be provided, but as yet we haven't found it. But these tombs, it doesn't lessen the importance of the tombs that we haven't found the site of the settlements. They are the earliest extant monuments in Kerry. Nothing earlier that's still standing has been discovered that's older than Killaclohane 1. The oldest extant monument in the county, and they are the oldest burial monuments in the county, the 3 of them. Unfortunately, the 3rd one hasn't been excavated, but at some time it will, and hopefully it will confirm what we have found out, that not alone are the monuments very early in date, but the long history of use shows that they were important in the social, political, like the geopolitical history of the landscape. They possibly were used as ways for subsequent groups that settled in the area to create a linkage back to a past that they didn't remember, but a past that gave them, if you like, rights of tenure in the area, rights of ownership of the land. So the monuments have a huge significance outside of just the burials that were placed in them, as they became in many ways representative of ownership of the land and of links to a past that was long gone.